All right, it is 3 o'clock, so I think we're going to try to stay on schedule and get this thing rolling. For everybody who's kind of sitting out there, there are good seats available. Feel free to move up. I won't even need the microphone if you guys come on up. But hey, it's intimate, so maybe we can even get some Q&A in from everybody else. But listen, our session today is titled Navigating Complexity and How Comprehensive End-to-End Logistics Solutions Drives Flexibility and Resilience. And I know that that's just kind of a common theme, but I'm not sure that there's anything that kind of talks about what's been going on in our industry more so than really resilience. So if you think about the past few years, right, we've lived through, I think, just about every type of disruption imaginable, whether it's going from extreme market swings, capacity cycles within sight of those streams, consumers, right? And they may be holding up pretty well right now, but I think if you take a look at their confidence levels, it's about an all-time low. We've got Liberation Day, tariffs, driving a little bit of change taking place. We've had the ISM at about 50 or below for about 3 years. We've got new technology being deployed almost, it feels like daily, but with agentic AI coming into our space and the broader supply chain as a whole. So we really think about resiliency. It's pretty pertinent to us. I think the one thing that this panel that we all talked about and discussed is, listen, the old playbook just really doesn't apply anymore, right? You need new playbooks to change as rapidly as the world's changing right now. So when we talk about resiliency and the ability to adapt, it's all about how do you do that quickly, timely, and also with the least amount of disruption, and hopefully improve communication, because those are the keys to really getting through it. So anyhow, today's discussion, we've got a heck of a panel here today that I'm really impressed to be part of. They're going to be able to cover this from technology operations, from managed transportation to intermodal and the shipper voice. So we're really going to get it from all the angles, and we'll try to have a discussion about that today. So before I jump into the questions, I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves. Just so you know, I'm Sean Burke. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Echo Global Logistics.
Jesus Alvarez, Head of Business Development for Mexico.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Anne Acampora. I am a procurement logistics manager for a company named Henkel. Not the knife company. We're a CPG and adhesives global leader.
Carlos Fernandez, Divisional Vice President for Carrier Sales at Echo Global Logistics, oversee our Carrier Sales Department.
I want to thank all 18 of you for being here.
We get double credit.
Yes. We'll sign that off. My name is Jamie Petrozelka, Senior Vice President of Managed Transportation at Echo. Thanks for coming, guys and gals.
Thanks for not leaving after Jamie's introduction. Dutch Fry, Vice President of Intermodal Business Development at Echo also.
So yeah, we'll kind of kick this off, and I think it's probably most important as we listen from Anne here at Henkel and hear from her perspective, from a U.S. domestic transportation in the last 2 to 3 years, what's tested maybe your resiliency the most over that period of time?
Yeah, I'm sure everyone in the room can attest that it hasn't been a smooth ship. There's basically a level of uncertainty that's always around us for all sorts of reasons. As a shipper, we really kind of are weathering the different storms, and that brings me to one disruption is weather has been a big portion for us. We have locations across the country and some places that are susceptible to weather, wildfires, winter weather, flooding. So kind of being aware of what's happening there. Really kind of navigating this tariff situation, even if you're not importing or exporting, I think it's struggling with capacity and where the capacity is shifting, where inventory levels have to be, and just really like keeping your hat on of what's coming down the pike here. So being proactive is something that is, I'm sure, on everybody's mind, and how the best we can do that in this kind of environment.
I appreciate it, Ann. And I guess for everybody else, right, when you think about all the different angles of complexity that's out here, whether it's capacity cycles, regulations, consumer shifts, what do you see the largest driver of complexity today? Jesus, maybe we'll start with you.
Well, on my end, seeing obviously south of the border right? You're always dealing with two countries, right? You're dealing with two customs systems. You're dealing with two sets of regulations. We know what occurred in March of April, Liberation, where we didn't know what we were going to pay, right, or what shippers were going to pay, and that causes a bit of uncertainty, right? And the most important thing is to really identify what kind of partner you have, right, and always plan for the worst. Whether it's the partnerships on having additional customs brokerage, right? There was in that time there was also a suspension period for customs brokerage. So if you didn't have one, it's stuck, right? Whether it's 3, 4, 5 days, what does that mean for a shipper and their bottom line, or not receiving or not reaching to the end receiver? So partnering up, having contingency plans, prepare for the worst, because one thing about Mexico, what's certain is the uncertainty, right? Something's always going to happen, so always having a backup plan for what may arise.
Great. Carlos?
So I would say, on our side, the largest uncertainty today was, tariffs. It was, push-pull, all sorts of fun stuff this year, and drove our network, or what we thought was going to be a recovery year, into less than. But yeah, it caused a lot of uncertainty and spiked demand in the beginning of the year, and then we saw it chill out a lot since then. So,
Nice.
Jamie?
From a managed transportation standpoint, what we've seen over the last couple years, the drive for technology and trying to keep up with the need that customers and carriers alike are both looking for, and this is ever changing. It seems like there's something new every 6 months, and as a 3PL, trying to keep up with that to stay ahead of the game has been a little bit more complex than probably it has been in years past.
I'll maybe take a different look from the intermodal perspective. Demand planning has been really challenged over these last couple of years. We came out of COVID when everything was spiking, and when it comes to railroading anyway, there's a finite amount of capacity on the tracks. And we went from this, there's not enough inventory of containers out there to now there's maybe too many because the demand planning was a little out of whack. And this year in particular, we saw this pull forward effect where now we're trying to balance the scales over the second half and make sure all those boxes are full. And so I think working very closely with demand planners and staying in constant communication help create some of the resiliency we really need.
It's always interesting. It's a lot of challenges out there, and it's a little different depending on which area you're focusing on, the end-to-end supply chain. Jamie, kind of talking about end-to-end, how does managed transportation, right? When you think about that from a company taking it from managing it themselves to that, then trying to get a trusted advisor to do both the technology and the execution piece. How's that kind of provide greater flexibility to the shippers right now where they're looking at a lot of volatility, especially in the truckload market and even some in the LTL market domestically?
Yeah. So with a managed transportation partner, you're going to get a single partner that's going to be both your tactical and strategic partner. And I'm saying that from a capacity standpoint, continuous improvement, the day-to-day operations, reporting, complete supply chain visibility. So take it from a carrier selection standpoint. With a managed transportation partner, you can use a combination of both assets, 3PLs, and your partner's brokerage, and look from a price and service standpoint, and we can try to optimize each and every lane depending on what the need is for that lane. Then you would look at from a continuous improvement standpoint, optimization, consolidation, as long as your partner has the right tools from a technology standpoint and a data science team to look at these opportunities that are going to drive cost reductions and hopefully efficiency gains throughout your customer supply chain. Those are two of the main, I would say, the main factors that come into play with managed transportation. But then you have a dedicated account team. They're going to handle the day-to-day tactical. You have one throat to choke. You know where to go. You don't have to call multiple providers. You go to the same team. They get to know your business as well as you do. So that's where that continuous improvement comes in, because we're going to run a lot of what-if scenarios and say, if you do X, Y, or Z differently, this is what it means in terms of cost reductions or efficiency gains.
Jimmy, are most people that are having the discussions with you today really driven by understanding what changes they can make? Is it driven by cost? Is it driven by speed? Is it driven by hitting must arrive by day? What's the number one driving factor with all this change going on, but the market kind of being at a cost perspective low? What's driving those conversations today, bringing them to the table?
Well, it's all of the above, but I would say today, I mean, cost is always 1 or 1A, but service comes into play, because you have to pick, with everyone, it seems like everyone needs just in time. They want it. They don't want to hold a lot of inventory. So we have to pick the right carrier service level. There is the ability, and I think, as a larger 3PL, we have the technology and the reporting capabilities to look for those continuous improvement opportunities where some mid to smaller shippers may not. Some of the largers do, but they get caught up a little bit internally, where they don't want to focus on that as much potentially. So I would say it's more along the lines of, how can you help us drive costs out of our supply chain and keep service levels where they're at today?
Appreciate it. And Dutch, I mean, heading up intermodal, really where you kind of think about cost efficiency, right? But also meeting environmental demands. How is that evolving during this change? So if I kind of think about it historically, for an old guy like myself that's been either on the shipper side or the 3PL side for 3 decades or so, felt like you knew who the intermodal shippers were, and they were there. They were always going to be there. Lots of ongoing conversations, but not as much conversion. Today, in today's environment with everything going on, tell me about those conversations you're having and who's looking to explore intermodal now and why.
Yeah, I think maybe just a little history, right? During the pandemic, you could say intermodal got sold out, right? Everyone, it was very busy, tons of robust demand. Quite frankly, some customers pulled back a little bit from that. And I think over these last several years, what we've seen is that sort of this return to it as a viable option from customers who might have been averse to it. I think additionally, from the sustainability standpoint, we've seen a lot of clients come to us because they want to be first. They want to be best in class. They want to actually show that they are a true sustainable partner, and being able to report on those things and deliver, true sustainability to show that is extremely important to most clients in this day. Obviously, intermodal's proximity to efficiency in terms of energy costs help provide it the most beneficial option or alternative to truckload. So I think that's where you've seen some wins truly. But the reality is, and I'll kind of piggyback what Jamie said, cost is still really important. When we have these sort of really competitive truckload rates in the short haul space or shorter haul space for intermodal, it creates sort of this challenge to grow. Where we've seen the most growth is number one, the long hauls, the customers who are committed to the sustainability options. And then additionally, the clients who are utilizing intermodal as a true parity to truckload. They know it's part of their solution. They have to offer it. They know that it might be less cost compelling now, but over the long term, intermodal being 10 to 11% cheaper than truck is always going to prevail. And so I think those who are loyal to the mode are going to see the biggest gains over the next year or two.
Appreciate it. And then Carlos, I'm going to jump to you real quick, just from the carrier's perspective, right? All this change and disruption and maybe uncertainty can create a little bit of a challenge between a broker, right, and the carriers themselves. So right now, I guess, how are you bringing value to that? How are they helping out the brokers? What's the keys to success right now working through this challenging market environment?
So I would say we try to be a broker of choice to our carriers, ensuring that we're resolving issues as quickly as possible, that we're being transparent with our carrier providers, that we are, if an issue arises, that we're working through a solution with that provider, that we're taking their feedback. If there's an issue with the shipper, hey, Carlos, every day I show up to Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and ABC shipper is causing us issues, I'm going to bring that up to the shipper. I'm not going to just discredit the carrier, regardless of what market it is, right? Loose or tight. We want to make sure that we're providing our carriers with a high level of customer service, regardless of the market. So I want them coming back to me, hey, if the market's tight, I should be their broker of choice. If the market is loose, they know I'm someone that they can rely on to get them consistency and transparency across their network.
Appreciate that. Then Jesus, wow, you've probably been pretty busy since Liberation Day. Thinking about cross-border freight, it's become a bigger and bigger part, especially of U.S. companies' supply chains over the last decade or so. Plus, does Mexico-U.S. trade factor into resiliency? And what strategies help the shippers navigate that added layer of complexity at the cross-border?
So I think post-liberation, right, there's a lot of unknowns at the border, right? We always call the border the black hole, right? You don't know what's going on, right? We talked to our in-house customs brokerage, and they mentioned, the HTS revisions. There were about 24 this fiscal year. Last year, there was maybe 1, right? So some of these customs brokerages are acting like lawyers, right? They're constantly reading up on the paperwork, trying to see, if it's 20%, if it's 40, if it's 35. Leverage those relationships, leverage the partners that you've partnered up with, right? You have them to utilize them to take advantage of that knowledge, to know how to plan. Obviously, technology plays a major role, right? Which with those POs, those HTS codes, is it cost effective to be importing this from Mexico? Does it make more sense to go to Asia? Does it make more sense to go to Latin America, right? And not to say to disrupt the entire supply chain, but to maybe source it from a much more strategic location. In addition to that, on the automotive and the OEM side, we've seen a lot of utilization on the FTZs, on the bonded warehousing, right? Hey, I think, Trump's going to change his mind. Maybe the tariffs are going to go down from 40 to 30. Let me put this in a bonded warehouse, and then, the first of the month, once he makes that decision, let's send it all out to our destination, Spartanburg or wherever, and save a couple points. So do you have someone that could give you this advice? Do you have someone that could steer you in the right direction? And if you're not going to take it, at least you know about it, right? And once that issue arises again, now you are much more knowledgeable, whether it's talking to, the decision makers within your entity, or you have the, the ownership to be able to make those calls, and also not throwing your eggs in one basket, right? There isn't only one port. Right? Do you have a customs brokerage? Do you have a provider, a relationship with the carriers or your brokers that at the drop of a dime, when there's a shutdown or a demonstration and Nuevo Laredo is shut down, can you cross through Reynosa McAllen? Can you cross through Eagle Pass? If you don't, you should probably set up those solutions and have them in place just in case the worst happens, because it probably will at some point.
I appreciate that. Yeah, you talked a lot about earlier. Before we got up here today, you were sharing with me a little bit, last year, so the fiscal year for the government just shut down. Government shut down. We just closed out the fiscal year. And after all was said and done, all the puts, all the takes, everything, cross-border volume actually grew 0.4%. Probably in a year we thought it'd grow 5 to 8%. Yeah. But the macroeconomy, it didn't slow it down horrifically. Is it lumpy? Like, how is the border crossings looking since the beginning of the year?
So it did drop 0.42%. So it's very minimal, right? But when you see the bullwhip effect, the issues that you saw with Liberation, all the news, right? You would think we're down 15 points, we're down 20, like the world's coming to an end. It's not, right? Even at its worst, it was stagnant. Right, so I do see a dip in imports exports from Asia, and I do think that volume, that need for product is going to be supplemented by another country. It's just the truth, right? And obviously, the most natural fit is going to be the North American partners, right? We're going to see the discussions and the renegotiation of the USMCA in the near future. I believe that from here on out, there will be significant growth, whether that's a couple points, whether that's, close to the double digits. If it doesn't happen next year, it'll probably be the following year. But as long as we alienate ourselves and from overseas and focus more on our regionalization rather than globalization, our primary partner in this trade is going to be Mexico.
Great, appreciate it. Now, Ann, sitting from where you're sitting, there's a lot going on. And when you think about, partnerships right now, and I'm sure everybody out in the hallway, everybody here today is like, how do I get in with a shipper? How do I differentiate myself? When you're sitting down as the individual, everybody's calling you right now. Everyone's beating down your door in this type of market. How do people truly differentiate themselves, even within your network? What are you looking for there?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's still a lot of capacity out there, and there's not a lot of demand. So certainly we're getting a lot of people reaching out. And it's really that partnership mentality that we have. And we know that that's a two-way street. So at Henkel, we focus on partnerships as much as we can. Sure, there may be some transactional freight, but it's very limited. We really want to work with our partners to share our goals, where we're going, and really understand how you as a partner can get there with us. What kind of solutions do you have that's more than just freight point A to point B? We want that full value partner. Do you have sustainability initiatives? Do you have technology? Even if you don't, can you tell me that there's going to be a problem with freight before the customer tells me? I mean, that's still, from a service perspective, of course, that's paramount. So really just understanding that we have to have that two-way communication. We have to build trust. Trust is very important. We've had meetings before where we've talked to carriers and they just said, yes, whatever you want, because they needed to keep the business. I think we understand that not all freight is good freight anymore, and we want our partners to be able to tell us when there's a problem. Like if we assume a certain lane needs something and we maybe give you a target price, but you're on the ground, you're seeing that, and you can share with us and say, listen, I know what you're saying, but we need this for that. There's overnight delivery, or there's usually, extra time that our driver has to sit there. That's just something that we want to hear that feedback from. Because if you don't tell us and you try to just make it work, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to work and not be a sustainable thing. So really being proactive with us, building trust, and having that two-way partnership is definitely something that we value with all of our suppliers.
Appreciate that. I guess to all the panelists, right, how do you balance that flexibility, right, adjusting to daily market conditions with resilience, planning for the long term? Because I think, and Anne, you can answer that too, I think that's the challenge that we all kind of find ourselves in, the firefighting of today, the challenges of today, and then planning for the long-term success in the future. Whoever wants to take it first, Anne?
Yeah, I can just jump in. So that's certainly, on top of our mind. We don't want to build these relationships and then have someone fail. So what we try to do is build in resilience discussions. We look at awards multiple times during the year, negotiate. We take a look at market, every couple months, just to make sure that we're all still okay. The last thing we want to do is, make somebody have to take a hit just to service us. So really, keeping that strategy in mind where we know market will influence pricing, but also what kind of pricing options are there? Can we do dynamic pricing? Is managed transportation something we should employ? Consolidating some of the lanes that we have to find regional carriers that may help us with some low volume. Really trying to be a little bit, out of the box. Again, like I said, point A to point B is not really the way anymore. And just for us, trying to be as transparent as possible. If we know there's going to be network changes, if we know we're closing a location, if we know there's seasonality, the best thing we can do as a partner is share that information.
I appreciate that. Anybody else want to add on to that?
Yeah, on the side, of Mexico, balance, right? Balance is probably one of the most important things. I mean, you know, during standard
Those of you
season,
who didn't hear it, Ann said, good luck.
so you'll see maybe 7-1, right? There's 7 exports from Mexico to the U.S. for every 1 shipment coming down. During COVID, gosh, it was 20, 30 exports to 1 southbound. So if you don't have that balance, right? It's almost impossible to make it work, right? You're going to take the shorts. You're going to have to pay for deadhead, or you're going to, fail on the customer, right? And not be able to service them. So the partnership is important, right? And being able to keep that balance going, creating solutions across your entire network, identifying customers that are allowing you to use their, customers allowing you to take the northbound, but also supplement you with some southbound capacity to keep you, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, to not tip the scale one side or the other. Because once you do, that's when you start to see the following RFP or the following opportunity come a couple points higher, because you're not able to source the most effective, cost-effective, and service-worthy carrier. So being able to, like Ann said, focus, build that relationship, turn down the bad freight, or at least being able to table that for the near future until you're still at equilibrium or as close as you can. Providing those opportunities to the customer. Hey, our customs brokerage could cross through El Paso. We have that capacity to give you that service if you allow us to maybe take it this way or take it that way, and get creative to show your worth as a partner, and being able to keep them happy and balance your freight and be able to bring on more opportunities.
It's funny, in the context of what you both just said, I heard balance, the intermodal guy talking, right? That so much originates on the West Coast, and so finding balance in the intermodal space is always super important. But I'll even dial it back a little bit more, as we're all consumers in this room. We all like options. We all like to walk into a store and be able to pick out what we want. And I think in terms of the supply chain, at least in our world, canvassing the industry, whether that's truck or rail or LTL or whatever it may be, but to make sure you can offer your clients all of those options, so that when something does arise, you have alternatives that you can pick out. And my wife's a big, purveyor of food being delivered to the house, and inevitably what happens, you get a phone call and says, hey, we're out of this at the store. Would you like to replace it with something else? And I kind of feel like we solve problems in the same way, where, hey, you might be out of this capacity here, but if you make enough calls, or if you're willing to look on that shelf, you can find it and usually appease the client. And I think both ways distribute not like flexibility in the moment, but resiliency over time of doing that, where client becomes aware of everything or carrier for that matter, and knowing you have those options to offer.
Appreciate it. Let's shift a little bit, talking about regulatory and potential market shifts. I feel like we've been talking about the market's going to shift for 3.5 years, and it certainly hasn't. But there's always something to kind of think about. So, Carlos, I guess the first one is for you. Just 2 weeks ago or so, the new FMCSA CDL domiciled rule came out. And some people are reporting that this could impact up to about 6% of the driver pool. How should shippers or anybody in this room really think about the regulatory changes that this could have? Is this going to be a catalyst for a shift? Is this going to be disruptive? How are you thinking about this?
I would definitely think it would be disruptive. How quick that's going to happen is yet to be determined. When you talk about 6% of the capacity of the marketplace, I think of things like DOT Road Check Week, where a lot of drivers decide not to go on the road because they don't want to deal with the hassle of getting pulled over by the DOT. That pulls out about 6% or 5% of the capacity that we normally see. And it causes a tremendous...
And that happens overnight.
Yes, it's quick. Causes a tremendous disturbance. Rates go up. There is less capacity available. So 6% pulled out of the marketplace today would cause enough for rates to go up, for it to be very difficult to move freight, possibly for service to go down. There are, I would say, big implications that'll come or arise from that happening. Like I said, this isn't going to happen. It's not overnight. So It may be a longer, I'd say 6 to 12 months before that actually happens. But I was reading something last week in the news too, that they had the Oklahoma Highway Patrol working with ICE, pulling over drivers over the course of 2 to 3 days. I want to say they took 120 drivers out of service. So it's going to happen unless there's a change in administration. This is the way the world is, and we're going to see definitely less capacity available, and we need to prepare for that.
It certainly seems like with all the additional capacity that entered during COVID, I mean, just a record amount.
Yep.
And very little kind of leaving the market, whether it's interest rates on the equipment they purchased or whatever the reasons are that they're sticking around, loans that they got at low interest rates, et cetera. It feels like this probably will be absorbed, at least until there's a demand catalyst. Is that kind of your view on that? Anne, is that your view too?
Yeah, that's certainly our view. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of solicitors that I hear from, and that's really my gauge of the market. If I get 10 emails a day looking for my business, I know that the market's still in my favor. It's when they go away that I get nervous. So, yeah, I don't mind getting them. Sorry if I don't answer them. But yeah, I think I agree with you, Sean, that I think there needs to be a demand piece also. I think it's going to make it a little more balanced as this capacity exits, but there certainly needs to be a little bit of a jump start as well.
Feels that way, right? JB, as you're out there talking to shippers of all sizes, and they're looking at outsourcing their managed transportation. Some of that's budgetary, like you said, some of it's service. How much is this? Are they nervous or preparing for a shift in the market, things to get more complicated? How are the shippers kind of processing all of this?
Yeah, it varies by size, but I would say, Sean, you're right. They are, well, cautiously optimistic that it's going to stay the same for a while is probably not the right term to use. But the reason people are shopping, right, is they are preparing for the future. They realize that they don't have maybe the technology or the reporting tools, the buying power that they need to drive their business forward. So they're looking for avenues to really cut costs within their own organizations. And they say, hey, is a 3PL a better way to do this? Or can we buy the technology and hire additional people? And we're seeing more folks, especially to like the small to mid-sized businesses that don't want the capital outlay right now. And they want to drive that savings to help their business. So that's what they're looking for through a 3PL.
Makes sense. And Dutch, there's a little bit of changes going on the railroads these days. Might be kind of an announcement about maybe finally a transcontinental railroad. What's going on out there from a change perspective? How are you thinking about that? Does that impact the intermodal space?
If I didn't know this one, I think you'd let me go tomorrow. But yeah, yeah. Obviously, there's an $85 billion merger happening in our space right now with the Union Pacific purchasing the Norfolk Southern, or we'll call it a merger. You know, when you think about this playing out over the next 2 years, we'll say, quite frankly, I think it potentially removes some of the bottlenecks that we've seen historically in places like Chicago and Memphis and you know, also places that can be afflicted by winter weather. If Chicago's typically prepared for it, but a lot of snow typically inundates it. A little bit of snow in Memphis inundates the heck out of it. And so those things happen in our world. My guess, this is my best guess, an educated guess I'd like to think, is that if this merger passes, you'll see a lot better efficiency and throughput on the railroads. It's already been very good service relative to these last 2 years. Intermodal service has returned to pretty much historic highs. But I think that will actually go through the glass roof, you know, if the merger goes through, essentially because you'll have a day to potentially 2 days left of less of traffic on the network. And so, you know, you take a couple of containers out off of the road and traffic gets a little bit better, right? I think the same will happen in our rail space.
I appreciate it. So we've talked about partnerships. We've talked about changes. Now let's talk about the technology, because I think that's the next, right, kind of big piece or leg on the stool that's taking place. Is it's changing pretty rapidly. You know, we've been talking about visibility for a very long time in this space, and I think the definition of visibility continues to get challenged and pushed. And now we're talking about agentic AI and what that's going to do to the space. Let's kind of make it a little bit more real, you know, as to what's ahead of us for the next 12 months. So You know, Jesus, maybe we can start with you. When you think about technology and the importance of visibility in the cross-border, you talked about it being the black box. Talk to me a little bit about what you anticipate to come out of that space.
So there's two parts. It really depends on how you're moving your freight, right? You have option one, which is a door-to-door or a direct shipment, right? That one, in theory, is the easiest way of moving your transportation, right? One carrier picks up in Mexico, goes all the way to the border. They'll probably have an interchange with the U.S. entity, or they probably have their own sister company. They'll put a B1 driver, they'll do the drayage, and then they'll take it to the destination, right? When you're looking at a shipment like that, technology on visibility, right? Tracking, being able to track, right? We talk about P44 and 4 kites and all of these macro points on the U.S. side because the power unit is ever changing, right? The power unit on the Mexico side is not the same power unit on the U.S. side. Being able to trigger and have that visibility from the origin point in Mexico, right? Having that visibility, knowing where your freight is, being able to trigger that's crucial, right? The other piece is also on the customs brokerage, right? Being able to pass the information required to create the documentations, right? The CFDI, the Carta Porte, knowing that, hey, documents have been created, documents have been handed off to the carrier. Carrier is, crossing or reaching the border to cross. Hey, load is on the U.S. side, no problems. From there you're safe. Being able to have that visibility and, not have it be a black box is crucial. Now, on a transload side, it's even stickier because there's 6 parties, right? There's the Mexican carrier, the drayage carrier, the U.S. carrier, and then obviously the warehousing component in addition to the customs. So everything I said about the door-to-door, then you have to add, WMS. Maybe if you're keeping some safety stock on the warehouse at the border. If yard management system, maybe you keep a trailer and you want to know where that Mexico trailer is sitting at the yard, when it's being unloaded, when it's being transferred over, getting real-time images. Hey, this is how your trailer showed up. This is how, the formation of the pallets. We put it exactly back how it's supposed to on the U.S. carrier. Here's the straps, being able to look at every stage, at every step of the process and know that the shipment is getting to that destination the same way it was loaded at the very beginning, right? So there's, at the end of the day, it's all visibility. It's being in the know. There's some things here that are nice to have, but as we continue to evolve and technology becomes a bigger and bigger play, some of these things are going to be must-haves.
Appreciate it. And Carlos, you're probably more on the cutting edge side, your space, carrier sales, about technology. We've been having load boards forever, right? Yep. Now you've got apps to do that. Now people are really talking about agentic AI to actually do documentation collections and actually call and get track and trace. And you got to manage relationships with the tech. How do you see this kind of evolving? Is this just an enhancement to being more productive? Is there real value to everybody out there? What's your take on that?
We're in the early stages at Echo of rolling this out. So I'm optimistic. I feel like this is going to help our people be a lot more efficient than they are today. There's also a factor about AI that I don't have to tell anybody in this room about, is that it's not going to miss a step, right? So if I tell Scott, who's sitting up here in the green shirt, hey, Scott, I need you to make sure that you make a call on this load 3 hours before the pickup every time. Scott, although he's a perfect man and he probably would not miss a step, there may be a chance that he's out of the office and somebody else is supposed to help out with that. AI is not going to miss that. So I'm very optimistic that this is going to help us. Do I think it's going to replace the human? No. Do I think it's going to make us more efficient and help us to gain a lot over time? Yes.
That's good. And Jay, how much more important is technology discussions now with shippers?
Over the course of the last couple of years, it's infinitely increasing in terms of conversations, in terms of what abilities do you have as a 3PL, what can you offer us as a customer to help us be better on time, lower overall cost. If you don't have to track, right, and I guess you would say this, if you didn't have to call your 3PL partner or any carriers, because you knew where your freight was, you could save a body or reallocate that resource to do more strategic initiatives. So it's things like that that are pushing 3PLs to heavily invest in technology because the demand from the customer side is increasing by the day.
That's good. And how do you guys process all of this at the shipper side? Which
Yeah.
is probably hard to absorb too.
Well, I will say, everyone likes to share what tools they have, but really we want to know what's the value in the tools that you're bringing. So can you track and trace? Obviously, that's a great one. But, I want to know how you're thinking more strategically about my freight. You're seeing my freight, you're seeing other customers' freight. Can you come to me with some sourcing? Oh, look, there's a backhaul here for you, or we can eliminate deadhead here, or, this is what another customer is doing, and we have the tools to share that. Like, that's kind of the tools that we're interested in. Obviously, the operational is great too, but really, where's like the strategy and the benefit of having these tools? Because frankly, it gets a little noisy with all the different tools, with all the different suppliers. But if you can come with a good business case to say, this is what we can do with these tools, that's going to put you ahead.
That's a great point. I think that when I think about the tools that are out there now, we talk about the track and trace, we talk about efficiencies, which gets passed through, right, and cost savings, which is great for everybody. But it's really about the insights to the pieces of the transportation network that we never had before, that I get excited about. I think about dwell time. I think about the accessorials, what the root cause of it, why is it sitting there, who's really to blame? Instead of accessorials getting passed back and forth, and everybody getting upset to pay for them or pointing out to a contract, is actually getting down and saying, where was it sit? Where was it sitting? Why was it sitting there? At what point in time did the communication occur? Where was the documentation at that point? We're finally going to be able to begin answering those questions. We focus so much, and this is what you said at the beginning, point A to point B. But what's happening in between point A to point B is probably the most exciting to me. Is there's a lot of time sitting on both sides or on the side of a road that we've never really had visibility into that before. And so having the perfect robot to collect the information is awesome. Now being able to absorb that, put that into analytics and say, how do we actually remove the obstacle so we can move faster and lower safety stock, to me is kind of where I get excited. So I know we're kind of running out of time here, but if you think about U.S. transportation for 3 to 5 years out, what do you think the most important change is that shippers need to prepare for? And I guess, all of you guys from that, like, what's the most important thing that we've got to really prepare for?
Let's start with the shipper.
Start with what?
Start with the shipper. Yeah, so I think we just have to be comfortable working in uncertainty, and that comes with collaboration with our partners. Sustainability is obviously really big for us, and I hope it's big for every shipper. We just can't ignore that anymore. So really finding those right partners who can collaborate with us and try to be as proactive as possible. Look at those indicators and just try to build resilience and redundancies so that we don't get caught.
So we'll just do it this way. Let's just do one sentence, right? So I think what we agreed to is what's one sentence that's the single most important way U.S. shippers, carriers, and 3PLs can partner to build resilience together. So Dutch, we'll just start your way. We'll work this way.
I'll take a bit of a different approach, but piggyback
Sure,
off the last
following
question.
instructions has never been your strength.
We just talked about AI, and 3 years ago, 3 years ago, it was just the initial talk of it, right? Where we were just like, hey, what does this mean? What is AI? Everybody wants to have the AI tools, and I think how we partner together as a shipper carrier community with this new fancy tool is going to be the most critical success factor. And I say that I said this analogy the other day, but about 50 some odd, 70 years ago, the electric drill came out. Before that, everybody was using a screwdriver. I think a lot of laborers out there got really afraid of an electric drill because people thought it was going to take away their job. But the reality was it made the quality of their work better and what they could output a lot more. And I think the same about about the relationships that exist in this transportation world. The quicker we can do these transactions, the more we can actually focus on the real problems. right? And I think as soon as we can harness the AI, it'll help us figure out the answers to a lot of the problems that have plagued us for the last 100 years, whether it's weather or demand or anything else. So,
Jamie, maybe a one sentence.
sorry. Pat.
I mean, take all the answers, it's fine. No. I would say it's going to be the collaboration between the carriers, the 3PLs, and the shippers. It's tabled, what in the past, to use a 3PL or even a carrier, it was all about execution. And I think that's just table stakes now. Now it's about how can we be more strategic? How can we add value on a daily basis to both our carrier and our shipper partners to help, again, reduce cost, increase efficiencies. So the collaboration would be the answer.
Carlos?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Ann. I think collaboration is key. I also think transparency is key on both sides. So shippers need to, communicate with either the carrier or the broker on what their expectations are, what they need to have happen. And then the carrier needs to also communicate with the shipper on where they need help and how they can be a better partner to the carrier.
Yeah, I'm sensing a theme here. I have collaborate and build trust is going to be important.
Agreed. Wasn't even a full sentence. I liked it.
Quick.
With Mexico, I don't think it's the Mexico market or the cross-border market. I think everything's intertwined in the same ecosystem. So I think we should start viewing it as the North American approach and learn how to have a binational approach across all borders.
It's great. Now, I appreciate this entire panel. I guess when I look at it is, the whole time I've been here, it's gone from a lot of data to then a bunch of information. And I think for resiliency, where it's got to get to is collaborative planning and problem solving. Because all this data, no matter how good, no matter how fast, if we're not collaborating and we're not identifying root cause and we're not improving it, it's just more data and more information at our fingertips. And yeah, I really appreciate this panel. Feel free to grab any one of us and continue the discussion in the hallway. Thanks, everybody. Good job, guys.